Welcome, Adam's children, to this week's short sermon where we take a look at the complicated relationship the Wasteland has with precious metals like gold and silver, and currency in general. There are a few defining features of Fallout that fans have come to expect in the series, and one of those is the unique use of bottle caps as a currency. Just reference buying something in bottle caps out of context, and anyone with a passing familiarity with Fallout will immediately know what you're talking about. It has become a part of the game's DNA. Bottle caps are unique and quirky, but everyone has wondered at some point how exactly caps became such a dominant currency. Why would so many people opt for something so mundane as a bottle cap when they could be trading more valuable commodities like gold or silver? Indeed, my video where I tried to determine the worth of caps by calculating the worth of useless items had many asking in the comments why I didn't just determine the cap's worth based on gold. Surely, gold is as valuable in Fallout as it is in our world, right? Well, if that were the case, this video wouldn't be coming out. Gold and silver have a complicated relationship with Wastelanders in post-war America. I want to explore what gold and silver is used for, how it's regarded, and why different regions don't all have the same respect for the metals that empires and civilizations have fought and died over during the course of human history. This will require us to look at the history of money and to heavily discuss currency in order to make sense of all of this. So examining mankind's evolution of money, how currency came into being, and how it changed will help us understand why some groups or parts of the Wasteland use a certain currency and why they may or may not value precious metals as we do now. Although the use of money predates written history, archaeological data and contextual clues give us an idea of how money evolved over time. Currency is a medium of exchange, an item or commodity widely accepted to be used in exchange for goods and services. A number of items have been identified as a local currency in mankind's prehistory era, including things like pretty shells, cocoa beans, or precious metals. These currencies were often used in addition to bartering, aka trading goods and services for other things you need or want, and were usually highly localized, usually based on what the local group of people thought was beautiful or desirable. Debt, credit, and gift-giving were also part of the highly variable prehistory economic systems and would play a key role in the evolution of currency. Although we may not think of credit and debt as being an ancient concept, it makes sense when you think of a farmer, for example, who might need or want something outside of harvest season. The farmer would need to incur debt, promising to repay his debt when the future harvest came, in exchange for goods or services needed immediately. Thus, we see the first recorded instances of representative money, that is to say, money that itself is not valuable, but it represents something that is valuable. In ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BC, farmers would deposit their crops, often barley, at the local temple and receive a clay tablet that recorded how much they had deposited. That clay tablet could then be used to pay fees or debts to the temple. Clay tablets seem like a weird form of money, but currency started to look more like what we recognize with the shekel, which started as a standardized weight of barley. Anatolian traders calculated the value of items with this standard weight of barley, the shekel. They started to pre-weigh their barley and stamp a unique mark onto a piece of metal in lieu of constantly weighing barley to speed up and streamline transactions. These are some of the first forms of currency that we might recognize as coins. Trading over large distances and with foreign groups necessitated a form of money not tied to the local temple or economy, and therefore had to be something that everyone agreed had inherent value. Very often, groups came to use precious metals, specifically silver and gold, to transfer wealth and engage in trade. Copper and bronze could also be used, and societies that did not do large-scale trade often were slower to adopt such currencies, instead opting for their local currencies until much later. For the ruling classes, controlling the money became an important part of exercising power, and officially minted currency, most often in the form of coins, would be used. These coins were made out of precious metals and derived their value from the metal they were made from and how much of that metal was in the coin, making them commodity currencies. That is to say that their worth was tied to the metal that they were made of. Although modern history is not the first time fiat currency has been used, the 20th century marked the most widespread use of fiat currency. Fiat currency is money that is not inherently valuable, like a gold coin, like the previously popular gold-backed money that could be exchanged for its worth in actual gold. Fiat currency derives its value from the government and relies on a collective trust that merchants and other people will accept it as a medium of exchange. Alright, that was a simplified crash course in the history of money. Let's examine the different areas of the wasteland to understand their unique circumstances regarding currency, government, and see if we can make sense of their personal relationship with the shiny stuff. There is a pretty large difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, so let's first focus on the West Coast, starting with the earliest title, the original Fallout. As of 2161, when Fallout 1 takes place, no merchants or groups of people throughout Southern California use gold as a medium of exchange. That is to say, if you want to trade with someone in the area Fallout 1 covers, there is no expectation that payment must be conducted in gold or silver. Bottle caps are the currency widely accepted, having been pushed by the powerful water merchants at an unknown date, but it was probably sometime in the 2090s, which is when the hub was founded. A merchant group known as the Water Merchants controlled access to clean and plentiful water, and leveraged that monopoly to grow rich. They at some point adopted bottle caps as a form of representative currency in order to make transactions easier, with the bottle cap being worth a set volume of water. These caps themselves were not worth much, but the water that they could be exchanged for was critical to survival, and so the bottle caps became valuable. By the time Fallout 1 takes place, caps are widely accepted across all groups and locations in Southern California, big and small. Gold is not used as any sort of medium of exchange. Indeed, there is only one gold item in the whole game, and it is an urn, whose value to the owner is not in the gold itself, but in the sentimental value of the item. Fallout makes it apparent that gold is not economically important in this region at this time. We could compare Southern California at this time to the point in history when humans had shifted from earlier barter-dominated systems to a standardized representative currency, not too dissimilar from the Anatolian metal marks that were used by merchants that represented a weight of barley. Fallout 2 takes place in 2241, decades after the events of Fallout 1, and a lot has changed, including the New California Republic, which has emerged as a major power in the area. Their newfound authority and power has led to their currency completely supplanting bottle caps, and whatever other currencies may have been used in Central California, Northern California, and Western Nevada, which are the areas that are covered in the game. This new currency is in fact represented as gold coins, and major mining towns like Redding are sought after by the regional powers because of the gold produced by their mines. Redding trades the gold they mine to Vault City, New Reno, and the NCR for various goods because gold is in demand by all the factions, but Redding uses the new NCR currency for day-to-day affairs. They do have mine script, but they are on parity with the NCR currency, probably because of how widely accepted it is amongst all groups. The NCR has adopted the NCR dollar, represented in-game by gold-looking coins, and may have been adopted in 2189 when the NCR was officially founded. The NCR is so influential that their dollar is the primary currency used by all the large groups in Fallout 2, and this increased demand increases the strength of the dollar. bottle caps are no longer worth anything. In fact, a treasure trove of bottle caps can be found in a random encounter, but are completely worthless and can't be used to buy anything. The dollars appear to be a commodity currency. That is to say, they derive their value from the metal or metals that are in the coin itself. But the NCR has a certain level of control, as the coins are minted within the Republic. This kind of monetary policy is more reminiscent of the practice of empires from the Middle or Early Modern period, which covers the period from the fall of Rome in 476 up to the 18th century. During this time, coins made of precious metals were commonly minted and used as the primary currency, with a certain level of control by the ruler. The NCR was keen on securing the gold-producing cities in the region, and lore confirms that they were successful in this endeavor, after the Chosen One defeated the Enclave, further bolstering their power and aiding their expansionist ambitions. Fallout New Vegas is the latest of the West Coast games, taking place in 2281 and has the most interesting politics of any of the games, due to the large regional factions vying over power, land, and resources. Interestingly, the role and importance of gold has also changed since 2241, when we last saw the NCR dollar replace bottle caps as the desired currency. The NCR has continued to expand east, running into a new major power, Caesar's Legion. And sandwiched between the two is New Vegas, with its pre-war leader, Mr. House. The NCR has had some real troubles that led to overhauls in their currency. No longer are there individual coins like in Fallout 2. The NCR issues bills that functioned at first as a representative currency because they were backed by gold. But a crisis led the NCR to drop the gold standard and convert their currency to fiat. Sometime in the late 2250s or early 2260s, the NCR began a war with the Brotherhood of Steel. This war resulted in the Brotherhood targeting the NCR's gold reserves, where they successfully stole a large amount of gold. This ransacking and the ensuing panic caused people to rush to NCR banks to exchange their dollars for the gold it was backed by. To stave off the economic hardships that a bank run and the subsequent loss of trust and value in the dollar, the NCR switched to fiat currency. With their currency no longer backed by anything, it couldn't be exchanged for an equal amount of a certain commodity, like gold, and this causes the dollar to be the weakest of all currencies in the Mojave. The Legion only mints its currency in silver and gold, known as the denarius and aureus, respectively, and the currency is much stronger than the NCR dollar. The Legion currency is a commodity currency, and many people will seek them out for the precious metals that they contain, since it is one of the few ways that people can get their hands on actual gold and silver now. Incredibly, bottle caps made a big comeback after being worthless in 2241 because the big merchant consortiums were fed up with the NCR dollar crises and brought the bottle cap back as it was before, backed again by water. They are not able to regulate or manipulate the NCR dollar, but they can have an outsized influence on bottle caps and use this to their advantage. Merchants like the Crimson Caravan are actively finding any potential locations or equipment that could be used to make counterfeit bottle caps and swiftly destroying them. Additionally, gold bars are the coveted treasure in the Sierra Madre and can be traded for extraordinary value back in the Mojave. So while gold is mainly used as a commodity in the Mojave in 2281, one of the major factions, the Legion, uses gold and silver in order to produce their currency. It is obvious that there is a demand for gold though. It is considered a legitimate store of value, and most people are distrustful of the NCR's dollar because of their switch to fiat. The NCR here seems once again to be a microcosm of state and monetary evolution, as they have now completely switched to fiat currency in order to stave off financial ruin as a result of the NCR Brotherhood War. In our world, the United States took great measures to start to decouple the US dollar from gold after the Great Depression, when hoarding became a massive problem, and the US would eventually fully commit to fiat much later in 1971. So the NCR's complete evolution very closely follows the real-world history and evolution of money. Starting from a small town that engaged in limited trade, using bottle caps which represented a given volume of water, much like early currencies representing a fixed weight of barley. Once they grew, expanding and absorbing various groups and towns, they officially started to mint their own currency, shifting to precious metals and commodity currencies. This phenomenon in the real world was observed to happen as groups of people expanded their trade networks, and precious metals were seen to be the most agreed upon medium of exchange, culminating in the large empires that issued state-minted coins made of precious metals, just like the NCR is doing. The NCR switched to fiat currency due to a monetary crisis, again, mirroring a mostly 20th century phenomenon of countries adopting fiat currencies over previously gold-backed ones. And, at least in the United States, this process started with the Great Depression. We can see that the economic circumstances of the NCR, as it grew and expanded, had a tangible effect on whether or not gold and silver were considered desirable or even essential. The East Coast in some ways is more complicated, and in other ways much less complicated than the tangled web of relations and alliances between various powers on the West Coast. Here, though, too, we can see the circumstances in-game largely mirror mankind's own monetary history. Fallout 76 is the earliest of all East Coast games, or really all games for that matter. Only 25 years after the Great War, the state of Appalachia in 2102 is far from civilized. The importance of gold is a little complicated and changed based on the groups that could be found in the Appalachian region. Although all factions are functionally dead at the start of the game, some factions and groups are reintroduced after the player helps deal with the Scorched Plague, like the first responders. Gold bullion is a medium of exchange that is accepted by only a few merchants who sell high-level, rare and unique items, and bullion was only available after settlers and raiders repopulated the region and the player helps them uncover the gold treasure in Vault 79. Otherwise, gold is treated as a crafting item, with a distinction between normal gold and gold bullion. While normal gold has an inherent value like all crafting items do, it's not accepted as a currency. You can only barter with it. While a gold or silver bar is worth a substantial amount for their weight, unless it is bullion, it is only seen as a commodity that you buy, sell, or trade for. There are actually a handful of currencies in 76, and with Appalachia in such a state of flux, it is not all that surprising. Of the number of currencies that can be used, almost all of them are enforced by the pre-war in some way. The most prominent example is bottle caps, which are used by the robots at the White Springs Resort. A pre-war promotional event took place there to celebrate the release of Nuka-Cola Quantum, and the robots were programmed to accept bottle caps in exchange for real goods and items. This directive persisted after the Great War, and people that wanted access to the items that the robotic vendors had were forced to pay in caps. This created a demand for caps, giving them worth beyond their scrap metal value, even though there was no direct authoritative body to enforce this. Other smaller currencies like claim tokens, Mr. Fuzzy tokens, etc. are similarly given worth because of pre-war automated systems that only accept those forms of payment. Bottle caps, though, are far and away the most popular currency, and with how important caps became in Appalachia so quickly after the Great War, may play a role in why the entire East Coast seems to have adopted bottle caps. Bottle caps in Fallout 76 would most closely resemble the local and tribal currencies that didn't have any other meaning attached to them, other than they were the accepted currency. These currencies predate all other forms of currency like commodity or representative currencies that appeared much later. Caps are not backed by anything, and the only reason they are valuable in the first place is because a bunch of robots only accept caps as payment for their services and goods. Gold bullion is considered a valid medium of exchange, but with only 3 known people to trade it with, it is far from mainstream. Fallout 3 takes place after the events of Fallout 2, with the Lone Wanderer leaving the vault in 2277. There are no gold items at all in Fallout 3. Gold and silver are not spoken of in the context of trading or valuables, and the only currency is bottle caps. There is no given reason for the adoption of caps ever given in Fallout 3. There is no authority to back the use of caps. There is no inherent or implied value, and no pre-war system can be blamed for forcing people to use caps like in Fallout 76. People seem to use them because they have agreed amongst themselves that caps have a value that will be honored by others. This is another example of a currency whose value is based on nothing except what the local economy agrees, and is most similar to small, localized currencies that were used before the onset of commodity or representative currencies, similar to Fallout 76, except there is nothing to force capital wastelanders to use bottle caps. We may be able to trace the use of bottle caps to Fallout 76, who themselves had a basis for the adoption of caps as a currency, and maybe some interconnected trade propagated the use of bottle caps to places like the capital wasteland. No one seems to care about precious metals at this point, even though it has been 200 years since the bombs dropped. And this is similar to how, historically, localized economies that were relatively isolated from a lot of trade took longer to adopt silver and gold as a store of value or currency. Even though we have seen the West Coast evolve into large and expanding regional powers, the capital wasteland at this point is devoid of any large groups that could force the use of a certain currency on the populace. The Brotherhood of Steel and later the Enclave are the closest things we have to a governing faction, but it isn't until the end of Fallout 3 that the Brotherhood can begin to do more than just endlessly fight super mutants and actually begin to govern beyond themselves, starting with distributing the clean water from Project Purity. This is not canon, but it would be great to learn that the Brotherhood, upon defeating the Enclave in the Capital Wasteland twice, adopted caps as the standard currency and backed it with Aqua Pura. It would follow in the footsteps of the first Fallout, and Aqua Pura is in massive demand, with Aqua Pura routinely targeted by raiders and mercs, so backing caps with such a valuable resource would make sense. Fallout 4 takes place 10 years after Fallout 3 in 2287, and although it is the latest of all the Fallout games, there is no established governing power and no other currency except for caps, just like in Fallout 3. Well, I guess there's the charge card, but that can only be used when you pay with some caps first, so it doesn't really count. One difference here though is that Fallout 4 does have gold. It can be found as bars of gold or as a craftable resource, but similar to Fallout 76, it is only ever considered a tradable commodity, and its primary use is in crafting. The use of bottle caps here may also be related to the early establishment of bottle cap usage in Appalachia, but we just don't know for sure. Similar to the Capital Wasteland, the Commonwealth has no regional government, and attempts at forming a large governing body failed when the Institute sabotaged the fledgling Commonwealth Provisional Government by massacring all the representatives, and there's been no real authoritative group since. Although Wastelanders in the Commonwealth seem to be in a slightly better place than the Capital Wasteland, and even got as far as trying to build a regional government, they are still far, far behind other areas of post-war America, like the West Coast. For this reason, it doesn't come as a surprise that once again, we have a commonly accepted currency, caps, that have no value other than the expectation that people and merchants alike accept them for goods and services. Again, this is a situation most similar to limited local currencies, and even though there are precious metals that can be found, no one seems to really care for them and see them as a store of value like back west. So I believe there is a solid case that gold, silver, and other precious commodities that we consider valuable right now in our world are not universally seen as being valuable in post-war America, and I would argue this is mostly a function of how developed the area is. If the area lacks any large authoritative groups, be they a wealthy merchant or governmental body, don't have a strong local economy, and lack a large trade network with other areas, then they gravitate towards local, non-commodity, or representative currencies like on the East Coast. This may or may not include the use of precious metals, which the East Coast overwhelmingly has chosen to ignore. The next developmental step is the creation of an authoritative body that can enforce a currency, often backing it with some other commodity that is seen as valuable, like the water merchants controlling access to clean water in Southern California. This again could include the use of precious metals, but doesn't guarantee it. Once these groups grow to the point that they are a regional power and their economy encompasses a large population, precious metals are seen as a more useful storage of value and is an agreeable medium of exchange and large-scale trade. This is reflected in the NCR issuing golden currency and very actively targeting more sources of gold like the town of Redding. Lastly comes the representative and fiat-backed currencies by a large, bureaucratic, and administrative government, like how the NCR is represented in Fallout New Vegas. How developed any area of the wasteland is seems to correspond to what currency they use and also dictate whether they consider gold and silver valuable. There are some important points to consider in this comparison. First is that while there seems to be a correlation between how developed an area is and whether they consider gold and silver valuable, this does not at all explain why some of these areas are developing at different paces. Everything we talked about in this video is downstream of the circumstances that cause the developmental differences. Second, comparing post-war survivors trying to rebuild society and the slow march of mankind society through the ages is not a complete apples-to-apples comparison. Some ancient groups were isolated and therefore developed their own economic systems that didn't always correspond with larger and more well-established groups or empires and their economic practices. If a society developed without knowing what gold was or how to mine or smelt it, that is different from a population of modern people who have lived their whole lives being told and agree that gold, silver, gems, etc. have inherent value and are to be pursued. Post-war peoples didn't just forget that gold was valuable and that you could get rich if you had a lot of it. So if we have populations that were taught, shiny thing valuable, why wouldn't they go on to use it as a store of value after the bombs dropped when they come upon it through scavenging or trading? I think this is a very valid point, but I think it's also important to consider the ease with which gold could be used as a currency. The most common way to find gold in Fallout 4 and 76 is to find pre-war objects that are made out of gold. These are items such as watches, flip lighters, rings, or sometimes even just bars of gold in very rare circumstances. For groups of people that are having difficulty even getting clean water or trying to secure the most basic of human needs like food or shelter, would these people really have the resources, expertise, or time with which to melt down and get the gold from these items? These items themselves might inherently be valuable as well, like maybe a working watch is more valuable than the gold it sits in. Scrapping the gold from these items, melting it down, and forming it into smaller and more useful amounts for the purpose of use as a currency is likely beyond the capability of people just trying to survive. Think of bottle caps in contrast. They are small, easily transferable, and one cap is one cap. Put them in a pouch or on a string and you can easily transfer your wealth and pay for goods and services. Gold and silver's worth would be based on the amount that you can offer. There is no such thing as a gold, and therefore there would need to be effort to reduce these metals into smaller amounts to allow for more effective buying and selling, which not everyone has the means to do. To summarize, I think that the Great War in many ways could be considered a big reset button. the destruction was enough that we can fall into the trap of applying what seems like intuitive modern logic to groups that could, by all metrics, be considered living in a Stone Age-like existence. This seems strange at first, since old world technology is strewn all over, and I think this is a purposeful contrast on the part of the creators. Similar to how the positive, happy-go-lucky imagery of the Vault Boy, the pre-war advertisements, and music for the later titles is meant to contrast with the bleak, hopeless, grotesque, and violent wasteland, the struggle to meet the basic needs of survival is contrasted with the presence of rusted-out nuclear-powered vehicles, advanced roaming robots, old vaults, scientific facilities, and nuclear power plants echoing an advanced past that doesn't mean a damn thing to those that are suffering from radiation sickness, that are perpetually starving, or on the brink of dying from thirst. While the Fallout games cover the gamut from expanding nation-states in what should be called a post-apocalyptic world, it also shows the reality of devastation and struggle for survival that we come to expect from a post-apocalyptic game. And honestly, that is one of the things that makes the series so special, and one reason why it is my all-time favorite game series.
Not looking to buy right now.
Suit yourself, asshole.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. Go forth in Adam's strength. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next week.